All right, so big question number one is in the early writing or even pre-writing stage. And that question that perhaps you're asking yourself, or maybe you should be asking yourself, is how do I know if my idea is good enough for a book, or if the book that I'm writing is really good enough for publishing, launching, promotion, etc. Okay. Now that tends to be the question that people have in their minds and that they're thinking about and asking. I don't actually think it's the right question, but I wanted to pose it to you that way because I know that many people do ask that question. So the real question isn't whether or not your idea is good enough. It's whether or not your idea is marketable and strategic for your goals. Okay. So I want to take a couple of minutes and I'm going to teach you how to evaluate that. One thing that I always ask when I talk to authors one on one is they're always eager. I mean, always eager to tell me about their idea, to tell me about who their ideal client is and reader and how this book is going to help them. I always ask, tell me what you want this book to do for you. And oftentimes they stumble over that. Sometimes they have it really clear, but many times not. And this is really the thinking behind whether or not your idea is marketable and strategic for your goals, meaning you need to have goals that are really specific to the writing of your book. So let me give you some criteria to evaluate. Number one, does your idea, your book idea, solve a really big problem? Some would say a bleeding neck problem. Now, we're talking primarily nonfiction for a few minutes here, but people buy nonfiction books to solve a problem, to gain knowledge, or to experience some kind of transformation in their life. So you need to ask yourself, does my idea solve a problem for a really specific person? Who needs this and what pain point does this address? If you can't think of the answer to that, then you may be going far too broad with your book idea. And that is the danger that most new authors always face with writing is they think, well, I'm going to write a book that's as broad as possible because I want as big an audience as possible. And that is the wrong way to think. You need to go narrow initially. You want to solve a really specific problem for a really specific person. Okay. Then you'll know criteria number one, that your book idea is a good idea. Number two, is there a demand for your idea? You know, sometimes we're working very, very hard to come up with a solution for which there's no problem. Look at Amazon and see if books on similar topics exist. It's totally fine that you're going to have your own take on the book. You're going to have your own experiences, your own case studies, your own expertise, of course. But look, competition is a good thing. You don't want to blaze a trail on your own. You don't want to trot out into the jungle where there's no trail. Embrace the fact that there's other books on the subject matter, that there are other people trying to solve this problem, because it means that there is a demand for a solution. Now, your specific solution and your specific way about yourself and case studies and examples and life experiences will add a unique flavor to your solution, but you need to make sure that there's a problem that you're solving for. All right, number three criteria, is your idea unique? Now, you don't need to reinvent the wheel, but, try to come up with a fresh angle, a fresh way to describe your solution to the problem. One of the things that I like to do is I like to trademark stuff that I come up with. When we created our ghostwriting program, and I don't know anybody that does ghostwriting the way we do. I mean, I came about it completely honestly, meaning that like I discovered the problem, which many, many people have in ghostwriting, that I also had working with a traditional ghostwriter. And I found a solution to that problem that was completely unique to me. So what did I do? Well, I put a trademark on it. I put a name on it. I called it enhanced ghostwriting, and I trademarked it myself because it is a unique way from my perspective to deal with that problem. So look for a fresh angle on your solution. Now, your personal experience, your process, your framework, all of that is going to enhance the uniqueness of it 100%, but look for a fresh way to describe it. Okay. Number 4, does your idea, really, really important one, does your idea align with your business or your personal brand goals? Okay. Your book is going to position you as an authority, period. It's going to attract clients. It's going to open doors to speaking opportunities, media opportunities. If you're in business, ask yourself, the person that I'm solving a problem for, is this person my absolute ideal client? I have a good friend that is a pretty big time speaker, and I'm not even going to tell you the gender of this person, but this pretty big time speaker speaks on a subject matter in which they wrote about and became a authority in this particular subject matter, and now gets speaking opportunities. I'm talking about upwards of $15, $20, $25,000 for a speaking opportunity. And the problem is this person does not want to work with the people that she or he in the past solved the problem for. And why is that? Well, it could be a million reasons. It could be that your business moved on. It could be that you don't do those things anymore, et cetera. The first book that I wrote is called Life After Debt. It was for my financial services company. Guess what? I don't solve those problems for people anymore. I don't have a financial services company. I sold that business. So always be forward thinking. Make sure that who you're writing to solve a problem for is who you are super excited to be working with and you want to continue working with, at least until you write your next book. Number 5, do you have a built-in audience, or how do you plan to reach that audience? Now, if you already have a following, great. From my experience, most authors do not. But if you don't have one, are you willing to do some work to actually build one? Are you willing to do speaking engagements? Are you willing to create content? What about strategic partnerships? These are things that we talk about on a regular basis. Do you do paid advertising? Your book is powerful, but your book is a little like a supercharger. And if you know anything about internal combustion engines and automobiles, superchargers are great, but what superchargers are used for is they're bolted onto an engine to make it faster, more horsepower, etc. If a supercharger is not bolted onto an engine, what good is the supercharger, right? So in the same way, you should have your book bolted on to whatever it is that you're doing to reach your ideal client. Do you do paid ads? Then you do paid ads with your book. Do you do networking? Then you network with your book. Do you do speaking engagements? Then you do speaking engagements with your book. Or you can add any of those things as something that you're going to be doing with your book. This is a mistake that authors make. Authors think, I'm just going to publish my book and it's going to do the work for me. It doesn't work that way, right? Your book has to be bolted on and put in front of an audience, whether that's via social media or content or whatever else your plan is. But remember, it's the supercharger. It's not the engine itself. The engine is getting that message in front of your ideal client. All right. Number 6 and final criteria for question number 1. Can you talk about this subject matter endlessly? And perhaps you're interested in talking about this subject matter for years to come. A book isn't just a one-time project. It should be something that you're passionate about and that you're willing to promote long-term, okay? Your book doesn't need to have a shelf life. It really doesn't. Like publish, promote, profit, it's 6 years going strong, continues to go strong, continues to sell. The message is something that I talk about on a regular basis. I include it with my content. I include it with my outreach on LinkedIn. I include it with my paid advertising, all of it, right? This is what I do. If I chose to do something else, then rest assured, the first thing I would do is write a book so that I could talk about that thing with my book for years to come. Okay. So again, the question is, how do I know if my idea is good enough? But the real question isn't, is it good enough? It's, does my idea contribute to my strategic goals, and is it marketable to an audience? That's the way you need to think about it and think about your book. All right, question number 2. We have our book. We have our book down. We know what we want to do. We know it's aligned with our goals. We know what our strategic marketing plan is. So question number 2, should I self-publish or should I go the traditional publishing route? Okay, well, we're a hybrid publisher, which is really a combination of those two things, but really, ultimately, it is self-publishing plus, let's call it that. Okay. In the past, we know that the only real route was traditional publishing until Amazon came along and really democratized the entire process and took the barriers down that traditional publishers put up. So there's a couple of different things that you need to think about, and it's important for you to think about. And then at the very end, I'm going to give you one final criteria that's probably the most important criteria, and that's whether or not a traditional publisher even wants to work with you. Because, let's be honest, traditional publishers aren't interested in ideas as much as they're interested in you having a built-in audience. But I'll get to that in just a moment. Okay, so there are several factors to consider in self-publishing or hybrid publishing versus traditional publishing. Number one is, what kind of control over your content and your IP is important to you? If you want to have full creative and financial control, then you want to control the publishing with a self-published book or a hybrid published book. Okay? Because if a traditional publisher comes along and writes you a check or even exchanges, many times all they do is they exchange their work on your book, like editing and things like that, for the rights to your book. That's a bad deal. Never, never do that. But many, many people do. And what they're going to take from you is they're going to take control over the creative process. They're going to take control over the speed, which I'll get to in a second. And they're going to take control over your use of the book in the future. I have many friends, one in particular that comes to mind, that went the traditional publishing route because he was given a very, very large check for his book. And I'm talking about many hundreds of thousands of dollars. The problem is he cannot use that title, that book, that content in any of the ways that I use mine, publish, promote, profit, because it is owned, the rights, royalties, and control are owned by the traditional publisher. So you have to think ahead of time. What am I going to do with this book? How am I going to use this book? And if you're going to use this book in ways that we teach, which is ways like with free plus shipping funnels, and maybe you want to create a master class from it, and you want to use the name and the trademark in many different ways, then you need to be very, very careful with traditional publishing. Number 2, speed. With a traditional publisher, just expect that even if your book is done today, if you finished writing it today, it's going to be another probably 2 years before your book is going to be published, because it's going to have to go through all the different committees, all the different hands to ensure that it gets done. So speed is really important. If you're looking to move fast, then you can do that with self-publishing or with hybrid publishing. All right, what about cost? Well, with traditional publishers, generally speaking, they're going to cover all the cost up front. So you're not going to have to write a check to get your book edited, get your book designed, get your book published. So all the upfront costs are going to be incurred by you in self-publishing, or in most cases in hybrid publishing as well. Because you're retaining the rights, the royalties, and the control, then the self-publisher is simply serving a function, doing for you what may be difficult for you to do with design, publishing, book launch, media, PR, etc. A traditional publisher, and this is why many people want to go the route of traditional publishing, because they don't have the money themselves to actually front for their idea. And when they don't have the money to front for their idea, then they look for a traditional publisher, but they don't realize that oftentimes the traditional publisher isn't interested in the idea. What they're really interested in is your audience, if you have one. All right, next, royalties. Another thing that you need to understand is a key difference. Generally speaking, if you sell your book through Amazon, you're going to keep about 70% of the royalties. That's pretty good. If you get a traditional publishing deal, you can expect about 5% of the royalties, maybe as much as 15%, and that is after the advance is earned back in full. So if you're given any kind of advance or if any monies are fronted for your project, then the traditional publisher is going to take all of that first, and then they're going to take 85 to 95% of all the royalties going forward forever after that's paid back. Pretty significant, right? In fact, nobody would make a deal like that with something that they were assured of selling themselves. In fact, one of the things that you'll see, and obviously we're a hybrid publisher, more like a self-publisher. So, a hammer sees a nail, right? So what am I going to say? There may be some instances for some of you that traditional publishing would make sense, but I can tell you this. Many people now with very large audiences, people like Seth Godin and people with very big social media followings are now going more the hybrid and self-publishing route because they know they don't need the traditional publisher in any way, because the traditional publisher really isn't going to introduce them to a new audience. They're going to be doing that introduction themselves. So why don't they keep the lion's share of the money? Okay. Last but not least, and I referenced this a moment ago, and that is the big question is whether or not initially, let's say that you say, I want to go the traditional publishing route for whatever reason. I'm not worried about the rights. I'm not worried about the speed. I'm not worried about the royalties. I really want to get a decent sized check or any kind of check. I really want to get my idea out there. Fine. Then the big question is going to be, well, what are the criteria that the traditional publisher is going to use to decide whether or not to work with you? Okay, because they're in business. That's the reason that their names are at the top of big buildings, right? They're in business to make a profit. So the first thing that they're going to be concerned about is the size of your audience. Do you have a big social media following? Do you have a big email list? Do you have a very, very large past client database? If the answer is no to all of those things, then the likelihood of getting a traditional publishing deal is probably pretty slim. It's not the idea primarily that they're interested in, it's the audience of the author that they're interested in. So something to keep in mind. What to do, remember the question, should I go self-publishing, hybrid publishing, or more the traditional publishing route? Some things for you to consider and think about. Number 3, this is something that I hear a lot and people get excited about it, and I understand. So let's address it. How do I get my book into bookstores? Or should I even bother? So for most entrepreneurs, coaches, experts, people that are writing nonfiction books, answer this question yourself. When was the last time, comparatively speaking, that you were in a bookstore and purchased a book versus purchasing a book online on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, etc.? Now, I don't know about you, but I have a problem. I buy books all the time. I read about a new book a week, and I usually have about 3 books sitting on my desk in the morning, my area where I have coffee and I read. And I cannot tell you, for me personally, the last time that I was in a bookstore and actually physically bought a book. I do it every single week. I won't say every day, but I do it every single week on Amazon or Barnes and Noble via a link. So now, am I just weird because I don't leave the house and I can't leave because I have a 110-pound Argentine Dogo dog that demands my full attention? That is perhaps true. Yes, I will not argue with that point. But the statistics also back up what I'm saying. 70% of all books are sold on Amazon. And it's even a higher number if you just are exclusive nonfiction. People that are searching for a solution to a problem, where are they going? They're going online. That's the first place people go, not to a bookstore. So that's the number one thing that you need to be aware of, is in answer to the question, how do I get my book into bookstores, or should I even worry about it or bother, is okay, how much does it really matter? Now, I know there's other reasons. We'll get to those. So number one, it doesn't really matter that much because of the number of books that are sold. The other thing to be concerned about is bookstores don't keep books very long, okay? Something to understand about selling your book is that if you do get an order through 100 bookstores. Let's say Barnes & Noble wants to carry your book across 100 stores in the Southeast United States or something like that. They will order those books, but there will be a buy-sell arrangement made, which means that those books will be ordered, and if they do not sell quickly, usually within a month or two, what they will do is they will take those books off the shelf. They will send those books back to you at your expense, and they will put other books on the shelf to give those other books a chance to sell. So just understand, if your books aren't moving off bookstore shelves, then it's going to end up being a very costly exercise for you, because you're going to have to buy them all back. It's going to be at your expense to get them sent and shipped, etc. So just be aware of that. They will not sit on bookstore shelves for very long. Number three, bookstores will take a hefty cut as well. In fact, retailers will take between 40 and 50% of the profits, of retail profits, to house a book. It's expensive to have a retail space. We need to understand that. And they deserve that if they're selling books. So let's just say that with all that aside, that it still makes sense for you to get into a bookstore. Or let's just say, I want to say this as nicely as possible. Let's just say that our ego, or there's something within us that just wants to see our book on the shelf, okay? Even though it'll sell 100 times faster on Amazon, there's just something within us. So what do we do? Okay, there are some steps that you can take to get your book into a bookstore. Number one, you should distribute through something called Ingram Spark. That's the easiest way for somebody that is going through the self-publishing or hybrid publishing route, because what Ingram Spark, unlike Amazon, will actually make your book available for retailers worldwide. So you want to use both Amazon and Ingram Spark, because Ingram Spark will allow bookstores to buy your book, or any retailer worldwide to buy your book, okay? You're going to have to make your book returnable. We already talked about that. That's going to be an element that's important, and it could cost you money. Just be aware of that. Number two is, the best thing that you can do is go into your local bookstores and pitch your local book directly. If you have a local Barnes & Noble, you should go into that Barnes & Noble with copies of your book. You could go into that Barnes & Noble. If we did your launch, you could go in showing that your book was number one, that your book has 100 5-star reviews, that your book, was selling well. You can show them physically, you're the author, that your book is doing very, very well, and that's going to put their book on their radar, and you, being a local person, will have a very good chance to get that book into a local store, which could then carry over into a book signing event, or perhaps your book getting into a number of regional stores, etc. Okay? So number three, if this is important to you, start locally. This, by the way, is the exact same strategy that we recommend people that are trying to get PR and media on their own. The best thing you can do to get PR and media on your own is go to the local radio stations, go to the local TV stations, etc., because there's always the element of local boy makes good, local girl makes good, and they want to feature you. The same is true when it comes to getting your book into a local bookstore, okay? Bottom line is, look, for 95% of nonfiction authors, chasing bookstore placement isn't worth it. It doesn't make sense to do it. Instead, focus on Amazon. You could focus on bulk sales. We've talked about that in the past. Marketing directly to your reader, right? Through speaking engagements, through PR and media, through podcast appearances, through book funnels, all of that. If you own the rights, royalties, and control, then if a bookstore wants it, that's just gravy. That's just extra. We don't focus on it. We're not concerned about it. I mean that personally for my books as well. Okay? So that is question number three that people always ask about bookstores. And I get the sexiness and the coolness factor of it. It really comes down to dollars and cents. It's not worth your time, but start locally if that's important to you. Okay? All right. Question number four, and last but not least. And this is, I think, one of the more important ones. I talk about this, or an element of this, most of the time. And that is, how do I use my book to attract premium clients and or increase my prices? How do I use my book to attract premium clients and or increase my prices? So we talk about this a lot, and I give a lot of very specific strategies, but I want to give you a higher level thinking today in talking about it. Understand this: your book isn't just a book. Your book is your most powerful marketing asset by far. It is your most powerful positioning tool. It positions you as the authority in your space, the expert in your space. I was just talking to a client that we published about a year ago because he's done some amazing things with his book. I did a podcast interview on it. I'll share that with you down the road. But he was sharing about it. He said, Rob, he goes, I had no idea how many doors my book would open and how many opportunities. He goes, when I do a speaking engagement, sometimes what the company will do, if I do it for a large corporation, is they will send copies of my books out to like the middle management, the senior level to middle management level. And he said, when I get to those speaking engagements, I am, he says, I am like a rock star. He goes, it's embarrassing. He said, he's my age. He said, I've never experienced anything like this before. People crowd around me. They want my signature. They want to take pictures with me and with the book. I go, it's totally weird, right? Like, it's crazy. I mean, we're just somebody that wrote a book. And just understand the power that your book has in the hands of the people that you are solving a problem for. Your book is not just a book. It is your most powerful tool. Now, with that in mind, how should you use it? Well, every single way you can think of, every possible way you can think of to get it into that person's hands for free, to pay to put it in their hands if necessary, to give it away to get it into your ideal client's hands. Every single way, because it gives you the kind of instant credibility that you've never experienced before in your life. You determine that based on what you're through a couple of potential marketing routines. Let's say that you're really old school. You're belly to belly, right? You like to kiss babies and shake hands and meet people, and you're a networker. Great. Your book should be at every single networking event that you go to. If you're a door knocker, if you knock on doors as a real estate professional in a multi-million-dollar neighborhood, your book should be in your hand for every single one of those door knocking opportunities. Now, I say that a little facetiously because no one's knocking doors these days. At least they don't come to my door. Of course, I do have a 110-pound dog that walks around the yard, so that's probably another great reason to have a big dog. You don't get any salesmen coming to the door, which is kind of fun. But whatever it is that you're doing, if on one hand, what you're doing is meeting people face to face and networking, your book, it shouldn't be, oh, I'll get you a copy of my book. It should be, oh, look, I have 10 copies right here. I'll sign a copy for you, right? You want to get it into their hands. Let's say that you are somebody that's on social media a good bit. Well, I've shared with you about many clients. One that comes to mind is Taki Moore. What does Taki do? He gives his book away on social media. He has a funny story, always humor in his social media content. There's a little bit of humor. There's something that leads to an idea or a concept in his book. And then he says, if you'd like a copy of my book for free, just comment below and then some kind of funny word, $1 million coach or whatever. Easy. And now he's giving away copies, and oftentimes hundreds at a time. And these are PDF copies. I love to get the actual physical copy in people's hands. But when you're working on social media, that's no problem. You can do a PDF, and it doesn't cost you anything to do that. People will read it. People will be attracted to your message, and people will be, most importantly, attracted to you. So If you have that kind of influence and you're using it in all of these different ways, you're a networker, you're using it that way, you're using it online. Let's say now you're doing more speaking engagements than ever before. You're doing book signings at your speaking engagement, you're selling your books there, you're getting on PR and media, whatever it is, your book is for sale on your website. Let's say that you're even using paid advertising, like I talk about ad nauseum, right? What's going to happen when you're doing that? I'll tell you what's going to happen. You're going to have more leads and lead flow than you've ever had before. Okay. So, why do people keep their prices below what their real worth and value is? I'll tell you, because they're afraid of losing a deal. The reason, if you're not charging what you're really worth, the reason that that's happening is because you don't have enough people asking to work with you. If you did, you would raise your prices. It would happen automatically. It would happen purposefully. Why? Because you'd be full. You'd have to add new staff. You'd have to add people to take the sales leads or calls. That cost money. You'd have to build a business, or you could choose not to and instead raise your prices commensurate with your worth and do those things yourself. So when I asked the question in the beginning, right, how to use your book to attract great clients, premium clients, and raise your prices, just understand that the answer is the same to both of those things because one leads to the other naturally. If you raised your prices today and you have one new person a week looking for your services, you may very well lose that one opportunity. I understand that. There's real fear in that. But if you had 20 or 50 or 100 people in a week buying your book, reaching out to you, seeing you as the authority, do you think you could raise your prices? Of course you could. And you would raise your prices. So the bottom line is your book isn't just about selling copies or royalties. It is a client lead generation magnet, and it is your most powerful positioning and marketing tool. You are the expert. You are the rock star at a speaking engagement when people have read your book. I know it's funny. It's ridiculous. It's silly, right? You're still you. I'm still me. But people see you in a different light because of your book. And the more people that come to you, the more opportunities you have to serve and charge your real value commensurate with the kind of impact that you make on other people's lives. Okay? So those are our 4 questions. They deal with different stages of the book writing process, whether it's how do I know if my idea is good enough, or should I self-publish, hybrid publish, or traditional publish, getting my book into bookstores, or just using my book to attract premium clients and raising my prices. You're at one of those stages now. You'll be at all of those stages if you continue in the book writing process. And I hope that you do. And I hope that you see the power that your book can have as it meets somebody's need and solves their problem as it sits in their hand. Okay? So there you go. Thank you guys. I hope this was helpful to you.